Joining me now, somebody who understands the stakes of Tuesday's election very well, Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff under President Biden. Ron, I want to start with that paradox at the heart of this a little bit. Telling voters, look, we got a two-party system. That's the choice that you're basically faced at the ballot. One of those parties has shown itself to have lost faith with democracy in such a way that you got to vote for Democrats to preserve it. Yeah. And people say, well, that's not really a choice. What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, Chris, I want to be clear. I'm covered by the Hatch Act. I'm not going to advocate for one party or the other here standing on the lawns of the White House. I'd also say that's not what President Biden said last night. He made it clear there are Democrats and Republicans who do believe in elections, who do believe in democracy. What he pointed out was there's a faction in the Republican Party, MAGA Republicans, who have taken a position that they perpetuate the big lie, that they do not support democratic values, that they've been out there affiliating with QAnon and these other extreme groups. So I don't think it's true, and it's definitely not the president's view that every American has to vote Democratic if they stand for democracy. But they do. What the president's view is that Americans should stand up and speak out, and again, I can't advocate election results here, right, but they should make it clear that they want this not to be the last election in America, and they want to have democratic, not small d democratic officials running our elections and making sure that the candidates with the most votes are the ones that win.
You're standing on the White House lawn. You refer to the Hatch Act, which is a federal law that basically prevents people in your position from using their time in their official capacity to campaign. And it was sort of routinely flouted in the last administration. In fact, there were several findings by official bodies and oversight bodies that it had been flouted. Why does it matter? Like, why are you being careful now, and why does it matter?
Look, I think we try to obey the laws here at the White House. We're not perfect, and we make mistakes from time to time. But the point is, this is an administration that is dedicated to the rule of law, and that is dedicated to the principle that we should be a nation under the law. And that's why the president makes the decisions he makes, and that's why we do the things the way we do them. That's what President Biden promised the American people he would deliver if he was president, and that's what we try to deliver every day here.
You know, poll after poll shows that the top of mind issue for voters is the economy, and specifically it gets asked a bunch of ways, and I think you would agree with this and probably see it in your own polling and even in what you hear at the White House, which is inflation. And, yeah, that's not crazy. Inflation has not been this high in 40 years. I think it shows some signs of abating. We've got another rate hike from the Fed yesterday. If someone's watching this and they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? What's the Democratic Party or what's President Biden going to do about bringing inflation down in the rest of this year in 2023? What's your answer to that?
So, look, I think we're working very hard to bring down inflation. And I think the way I hear people talk about it is, the price they pay for things is just too much. So what are we doing? Well, first of all, the president's already launched an effort to bring down the price of gasoline. It's down $1.20 since June. We need to continue to make progress. He talked on Monday about the need for the oil industry to either bring down prices more or face a windfall profits tax. Beyond that, we passed, before the Congress left in the summer, the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, what does it do? It reduces inflation. That's why we passed it. Brings down the cost of prescription drugs, brings down health premiums, caps what seniors pay for their prescription drugs, brings down the cost of energy-efficient appliances, will lower your utility bills. Now, look, we have two very different directions going on in our country right now. That's what the president has done and is doing to fight inflation. Now, what are the Republicans in Congress talking about? They're saying if they get a majority, the first thing they will do is repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, they're running a lot of TV ads about inflation, but I don't understand how you're going to bring inflation down by repealing the bill to bring inflation down. And that's the difference between what the Democrats in Congress have done and want to do and what the Republicans in Congress are talking about.
One of the other things that's been floated, and there's been some controversy on this, Rick Scott earlier in the year talked about cuts or changes to budgeting for Medicare and Social Security. There's been other conversations coming from people that might be on the Ways and Means or Budget Committee in the House Republican majority if they win. They tend to say we don't actually mean that, but there's a pretty obvious trail there. Now, the president has been in public life a long time, and at various points he has supported various possible grand bargains, changes to Social Security, Medicare. There was the Bowles-Simpson situation back in Obama. Can you pledge that President Biden will veto anything that crosses his desk that would cut Social Security and Medicare?
Yes, absolutely. The president said that very clearly. We've said that very clearly. Look, I take your point, Chris, that they've tried to kind of hide the ball on this. But, you know, the front page of the New York Times today reports on the many statements by Republican leaders about their plans to cut Social Security, their specific plan to get rid of Social Security benefits for 65 and 66-year-olds. Their plans, by the way, not just Social Security, but also to raise co-pays and various payments people owe under Medicare as well. And what's more, Leader McCarthy has said that if they take the House, not only is he for those things, but that he will risk crashing the entire U.S. economy, something called a default, have the government for the first time in our history refuse to pay its bills unless President Biden bends to their demands to restructure Social Security and cut the benefits available under Medicare. And that's something the president just won't do.
All right, Ron Klain, who's chief of staff to the president of the United States, there on the White House lawn in his Hatch Act suit. I appreciate you coming on tonight, Ron.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right.